Passion, purpose, possibilities. They're all right there. But sometimes we need a little push. And that's where SheSez comes in. Think of it as a master class taught by the world's most interesting women, sharing stories and ideas, because girlfriends help each other. This is SheSez with Linda Grasso. Hello and welcome to SheSez. Our guest today is best-selling author and noted speaker Angella Nazarian. While so many of our guests have made one dramatic pivot, Angella has made several. From being a mother to two sons, to being a college professor, to co-founding an organization aimed at empowering women, to authoring 3 gorgeous coffee table books. Angella, you are a tour de force. Thank you for being here with me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Linda.
I want to begin with your immigration to the United States.
Yes.
Your family was fleeing the Iranian Revolution. How old were you at the time when you were sent to live in California?
I had just turned 11, and I have to backtrack and say I was the 5th and last child of my family, and there's a big age difference between all of us siblings. And I had 2 older brothers who were studying in the U.S. already. And so at the time when the revolution happened, my father sent me and my sister and my mom to come and visit for 2 weeks, and we never went back. As a matter of fact, my mom went back to help my dad liquidate some assets, and they got stuck for 5.5 years. So I lived with my siblings from age 11 to 16 and a half.
Wow, that is something that must have affected you deeply. A, you came to a foreign country at such a tender age, and B, you lived without your mother for 5 years.
Absolutely. I think that until you don't become a mother yourself, a lot of those feelings that I had put aside in terms of feeling left alone or not having had that support during the adolescent times didn't surface until I had my own kids.
And you were also a Persian Jew,
Yes.
living in Beverly Hills. Now, Beverly Hills is very Persian and Jewish, but
Yes.
back then it was very sort of Caucasian and it was kind of waspy, right?
Well, no, it's always been Jewish. And this is the interesting thing that I've always talked about. And actually, in the couple of books that I've written about, and also Malcolm Gladwell talks about it, is the outsider status. So Persian Jews are a real minority in Iran, very, very small minority in Iran. So we always felt like we were an outsider there, although we felt that we were Iranian. But there was a huge divide between the Muslim community and the Jewish community. And it was only 10 years or 15 years before the revolution when Jews really integrated into the mainstream culture of Iran. And then I moved to Beverly Hills, which was actually largely Jewish. But it was very Ashkenazi and European Jewish. And so when I was there, we were being redefined as Jews from the Middle East, and they would group us as Arabs. All of us are, and Iranians aren't even Arabs. But it really gives you an idea of how easily we get categorized into boxes. And sometimes we even do it for ourselves, right? Even within ourselves, that if my role is such and such, I'm not really going to move out of that role or identity.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We do that a lot.
Yes.
And that's called getting stuck. That's what I call getting stuck
I
on,
know.
SheSez.
Or repeating all the patterns again and again, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you end up going to UCLA, you get a degree in psychology, you go on to get your master's.
Yeah.
What was your original career aspiration at that point? Did you want to be a psychologist?
Well, this is an interesting thing. And it's so funny because when I was younger, I always was very good in school. I did very well in school, but coming from a very, very traditional Iranian culture, and then my parents were much older. Generationally, they could have been my grandparents. So they were much more strict. When they came from Iran, they actually escaped Iran and made their way to the U.S. When they saw me, they were dumbfounded. One is that they thought, oh my God, this is a rebellious girl. She wants to go to school and she wants to have a profession. That was unheard of for my father, because he felt that, you educate yourself, but he was in some ways very well-meaning, was afraid that if I were to go and get a career, I would hinder my chances of getting married. So not the most supportive, but obviously he would never stop me, of course.
So did you find yourself being really strong-willed, and did that affect your relationship with your parents?
It did affect my relationship because we had different kinds of perspectives, but I have to give him a lot of credit. So here's a father. My father was 52 years old when I was born. So you just imagine. And so he's in his 70s when he comes to the US and sees a completely different culture. I myself felt that within myself, that if I wanted to choose a path that is growthful for me, I need to have a partner that really supports me. And I wasn't going to back down on that. So I was very lucky that when I was very young, I met my husband and he was fully behind me. But what was very touching as well is that because I got married so young, I got married when I was 20. And I'm so blessed that I'm married to the same man and we have a wonderful relationship. But my father took him aside when we were getting engaged and said, I want to ask you for a favor. And I was thinking, what is he going to be asking him? This is so embarrassing. And he said, you know what? It's really important to Angela to continue studying, So I really want you to be supportive of her. And that to me was the biggest gift because he was ready to see me and what I wanted to do in my life and also communicate that to my husband, which was really beautiful, very touching.
So you get these degrees. What was your first job out of
So, yes.
college?
So I got my degree in industrial organizational psychology. And when I did my thesis was about group work and teamwork and how people from different ethnicities and gender, the sexes, how does that play in the realm of teamwork in organizations? And when I was a graduate student, I was also a part-time professor and I was teaching women's studies and social studies, so social psychology. So right after once I finished my dissertation, I was pregnant with Philip, my first son. And that was when I was 24. And I remember my professor who was chairing my dissertation told me, you're such a good student. I actually was the number one student in 22 departments. So I was very focused. Says, you're such a good student, but, studies have shown that women who have their kids very early on really don't go on to have very vibrant careers because they're starting out with the whole dilemma of childcare. And I completely understood what she was saying, but, I was crafting something else. I had another story for myself that I wanted to have a family when I was young. And I was lucky enough to be with a partner who wanted the same thing. So when I gave birth, after 6 months, I knew that there's no way I can become a consultant in a company and fly around and work in human resources and all that. And right away, I made a shift. I knew that I loved teaching so much, and I had been a part-time professor. So I went and applied for a professorship at Cal State Long Beach, and I started teaching classes there. So I was a professor of psychology for 11 years, and it was a really good way of fitting in, raising my family.
Because you had a second son a few years later.
Yes, 3 years later. And, it was, I was always part-time. So I can't say that I was a full-time, but I always had my foot in the door somewhere, working outside of the house. And that kept me stimulated, curious, and interacting with different people.
So there was a point when you decided on a change. Was it when the boys were in high school and it was that time when, they leave at the crack of dawn and they come home after dinner sometimes with sports and all the various activities that kids do? What was the point where you thought, I've got something else up my sleeve?
Right. So for me, after 11 years, I felt that I was teaching the same courses over and over again. And I felt that I needed a challenge for myself. It just didn't feel fresh anymore. And meanwhile, I've always been a proponent of really going in depth and studying something. And I had taken a year of evening classes in the Jungian Institute. And Jungian psychology to me really calls to me because it really deals with a lot of matters of midlife issues.
How do you spell that? I'm not familiar with
Jung,
you.
Carl Jung. So Jung.
Okay.
Carl Jung. So he was one of the disciples of Freud, but went on and had his own theory. But most of his theories really deal with midlife issues. And while I was sitting in class, there was one point where they talked about how somewhere near your midlife, you have this waning energy, like things don't interest you, which a lot of people think of as midlife crisis, correct? Mm-hmm. And how do you muddle through it? I mean, how do you go through it? And one of the things that he talks about is that while we're growing up, we rely on our primary talent. So we see what we're good at and we concentrate on that and we just develop that a lot. And then slowly, the reserve of energy with those talents kind of dissipate. And you feel a certain kind of dullness and repetitiveness with things. And I felt, okay, this is my calling. This is exactly what's happening to me. And so he said that the way to really infuse your life with more energy is going to a secondary function. So I'm being a little technical, but secondary function is doing things that you haven't done before and trying things that you haven't done, because that whole thing of touching an aspect of yourself that you're fearful of really brings a certain kind of energy to you.
It's so interesting. Literally, if there's a thread line through all the guests that have been on SheSez who have made big changes, post 35, it's moved towards the fear. It's to get things rustled up, to feel unsettled, and to dip your toes into waters that you haven't. How did you go from embracing that philosophy, that way of thinking, to light bulb went off, I'm going to write a book?
Right. So to me, writing the book was quite accidental. So what I decided to do is that I started, I saw a coach and I was telling her how, and she had these meditation seminars and all kinds of seminars, and she was a PhD. She was a clinician before who had made the switch and was doing group work. And when I told her about my predicament, she said, well, why don't you do women's groups? Because I was saying, I went to the chairperson of the psychology department, and I said, I want to talk about aspects of personal growth. And she turned to me and said, Angela, I really understand what you're saying, but kids that are 22 or 23 won't get it. And I understood her as well. And that's when I made the first pivot, that if I'm interested in something else, I need to take the first step and see how it goes. So, it's always very nice when you tell people, oh, yeah, I'm a professor in a college. And suddenly I completely dropped it. And I said, I'm going to do a syllabus with readings, but for adults about that's based on Carl Jung's theories, and we'll have a session every week, and it becomes more like a women's group. So believe it or not, it was just that first step that I took in leading women's groups, and which I did for 7 years. These women, there were 18 of them, for 6.5 years, they would meet once a week, except for summertime, but once a week. And they all were going through this very same things as I was, which number one is shows, yes, the people that you choose to spend the most time with really affect your emotional tone, they affect your aspirations, and they also have, they can either encourage you or dissuade you.
Absolutely. And one thing we always talk about on SheSez is how important it is when you are feeling the need for change that you're surrounding yourself with men or women who support you in that and can help you, see the trees through the forest,
Yes.
It's so critical.
And studies show that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So I always encourage people to think about who are the people that they spend the most time with, and what kind of lives they lead. What is their, again, I go back to emotional tone, because some people may have very exciting lives and they're achieving a lot. But if they still are not in touch with themselves and they have a sense of optimism in life, it changes the way you feel.
Absolutely. So you're leading these groups. That must have been incredibly gratifying. Did you see
Yes.
women sort of go through the tunnel, go in one end and come out the
Yes.
other? That must have been gratifying.
It was it was one of the most intimate and beautiful experiences I had. As a matter of fact, I just celebrated my 50th birthday, and all those women were with me celebrating, because it just creates a bond when you really share such depthful and intimate experiences with each other. So as a part of that group, we actually we talked about certain goals that we have for ourselves, and we committed to doing something new.
It's important to voice those things.
Yes, and you have to say it
actually
out
say them out
loud.
loud. Because once you say them out loud, they're real. Otherwise, you can just loop in your head.
Exactly. And you know what? That group was fabulous, because the next week or 2 weeks later, we would say, "Hey, Ellie, what happened? What did you
Yeah.
take that class, or did you try that, thing that you wanted to do?"
The other thing that's really cool about having a group like that and voicing an aspiration or making a vow to make a change is that, that you're held accountable, but also it gives other women who are so inclined a chance to help you.
That's
I was
right.
at a dinner the other night, or it was a cocktail party, and one of the women, we were talking about women empowerment and change and all the things that we're talking about. She said, "I want everybody to extend your hand to another woman here tonight and look her straight in the eye and say, 'What can I do to help you?'" And it
Mm,
changed the whole tenor of the party.
of
Everyone
course.
started doing it, and it was so great. Some of the women who were, maybe I wouldn't have talked to because, you tend to, go where your gal pals are, things you
That's
have in
right.
common with. We all started doing that, and I met fabulous women. So I think that's a cool thing that
It is very
getting
cool.
together, making a vow, and giving other women a chance to help you.
And you have the ability to inspire other people. So I think that, when you have certain groups that come together for a specific purpose, and that is to learn about yourself and to offer support, you can be a source of inspiration for other people, and other people can mentor you as well. So all around, I think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do. And it doesn't always have to be in a classroom or a workshop environment. I really tell women to seek out other like-minded people, women or men.
At what point did you decide to publish your first book,
Yes.
Life as a Visitor? Talk to me about that.
Yes. So while I was doing the women's groups, I said, I've never done, except for doing research writing, I've never written before. I'm going to take some writing classes. And while I was taking the writing classes, everybody in the class would say, "Angela, you have such an incredible story about your, Iranian past and your transition into this culture." And so right when I turned 40, I published my first book. And it's almost, a lot of women tell me, "How did that happen?" And I said, it's just feeling very naive about the whole process, and also asking myself, and at every juncture, I've asked myself this question: what's the worst that can happen? So when it was about publishing the book, a lot of people said it would be very hard to pitch. It's very hard to get an agent. It's very hard. You have a book that is part poetry, part, story. It's very hard to market that. And I told myself, what is the worst that can happen? It won't get published. So what? I mean, can I deal with, rejection? I think I can,
You snagged quite the publisher.
Yes, I know. That was pretty good too.
It's Assouline. Am I
Yes.
pronouncing that correctly?
Assouline, yes.
Assouline.
Yes.
A company that is known for publishing absolutely big, chunky,
Gorgeous,
gorgeous, highly editorial, artistic coffee books.
Absolutely.
How'd you do that, Angela?
How did I do that? So this is where the power of your network is so important. And don't be afraid to ask. That was one thing. Another thing that was it was learning experience for me. I remember once I was at a luncheon and there was a woman publisher seated next to me, but I was so shy about pitching anything about myself that I couldn't. And I left that day feeling so defeated that I could have actually turned around and mentioned something, no pressure, but mentioned it. Or maybe I could have asked her for her opinion or guidance. And I felt that it was a missed opportunity. So shortly after that, I was talking to another person and they said, my company is talking, well, first it was Rizzoli. First, it was my second pitch that I got, Assouline. And Rizzoli, I actually did 3 pitches to them, so they were quite interested. And while they were trying to decide on my book, another friend came up to me and said, my company may be working with Assouline. Would you want to pitch your story to them? And I said, absolutely. Absolutely. And I went and met with the publishers in person, so without an agent, which is also atypical.
Yeah. In fact, I've heard, don't do that. You have to have an agent. Not possible.
Well, and I felt that, I could be a very good representative of my work. And in today's time, it's also very important that they see a serious-minded person who's going to work in terms of marketing the book. That's become so important. Publishing 20 years ago is very different than publishing now. You need to have such an active role in promoting your own book.
And even now, I don't know what your experience is, but I've talked to so many different people who are trying to do it, and they all say something like, well, you have to have 100,000 followers on Instagram. And you have to have your own groundswell of social media. Is that what your experience as well?
Yeah. Well, and I don't have 100,000 in followers, but I'll tell you one is that because of my involvement in so many groups and nonprofits, my publishers were quite astounded, because the first time with my first book, the publisher said, how many do you want for your launch party? And I said, I want 400 books. And Book Soup was carrying the books, and they wouldn't allow it. They said, no, you have to pay for the books ahead of time, because nobody sells that many books. Al Gore was in town at the time, and they said Al Gore sold 350 books. How are you going to sell 400 books? So I actually literally had to call my publishers, and I said, please send me 400 books. And believe it or not, 400 books were sold.
So you had to pay for them, and then, of course, you sold
I
them.
didn't. I said,
oh, you didn't.
Take my word. If it doesn't sell, I'll pay for it.
Wow.
So, no, I sell. And, with my third book, I sold 600 books the first day. And it's really about other people coming and supporting my work.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you've crafted a platform for
Yes.
yourself. You are, a speaker. Before, you were an author. You reach out, you have groups, you speak at schools and various events, and
Right.
you're seen, as a prominent person in that field. And I think that, my hat's off to you for tapping into that and, asking for a little love back.
Yes, yes.
I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to. Like,
Absolutely.
I've supported this. Will you
Yeah.
guys, have
Come
a
and support?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the other thing, that if, my research with the most successful women has been that their network of people whom they work with is very important. Because in order to be a leader, or in order to affect change at any level, you have to have people that see your vision and are believing in your vision.
Do you see yourself as a leader?
Yes, now I do. Probably 10 years ago, I would shy around and say, no, well, it sounds very cocky. But I do think so. And everybody has the ability to be one. I don't feel like everybody has the ability to at least be a leader in some sphere of their life. And yeah, I think what I'm realizing in the past 10 years, in the past decade, because I've been more public with my work, is when you have that kind of enthusiasm, and I certainly do, I am passionate about the work that I do, and it's quite genuine. So the message goes to people's hearts. I really do feel that people can tell the difference between a genuine message and one that sounds like, somebody's taught them to talk that way.
I remember a couple of years ago, I was at home and I was on my computer, and all of a sudden I got this email and it said something to the effect. It was saying, oh, check out Angela's new app. She's got an app on coaching women, and it's an app where you can get coached. And I thought to myself, good God, this woman just does it all. She's such a doer.
I am.
You're a doer.
I am a doer. It's true. I don't know. I've heard that too. It's exciting. I don't know. I just don't think about it as doing. I just find an interesting project and I get really excited by it.
Yeah. And
if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it. And it's fun.
It supersedes any fear of failure and all the intimidation factors. Does anything intimidate you? What intimidates you, Angela?
Oh, a lot of things. A lot of things. What intimidates me is always, because I'm quite interested in many things, and if I say yes to a project, I really give 100% of myself. So what worries me, sometimes concerns me, is that I spread myself too thin. So it's always that, oh, this project seems interesting, but if I were to do a good job, I would really have to put in a lot of time, and will other aspects of my life fall through the cracks because of it?
Speaking of one of your passion projects, I know you co-founded Visionary Women, a nonprofit. Tell us about that.
So Visionary Women, a nonprofit, really was a very organic way of me growing into a bigger platform for women, not just in my community, but nationally and internationally. After writing my third book, which was called Visionary Women, I saw that, yes, having women come together to hear the life stories of other thought leaders and other women leaders is probably one of the best things that I could do to uplift my own community and myself. And believe it or not, we started doing these salon series. And with these salon series, we've grown into a membership group. And I'm happy to say in my third year, without having any galas or no luncheons, this is just 3 salon series a year, we have raised $340,000 and with very little overhead.
So the word visionary carries throughout a lot of your work. Let me grab your book here.
Yes.
For the YouTube watchers, yes, we're an audio podcast, but we also do videos. This is the sort of gorgeous kind of book that you're known for publishing, with beautiful pictures, very, as I said, editorial. Angela, what is it about the word visionary? There's a through line through all your work. You use that word a lot, whether it's your books, your nonprofit, some of your speaker series. Tell me about that.
What a fabulous question you asked. And nobody's ever asked me that question, believe it or not. I think visionary is a very powerful word because it means that you can see something that doesn't exist just yet. Being a visionary means that there's a part of you that has this power of imagination and will that can create and manifest something that doesn't exist yet. And that's very exciting.
I'm fascinated by visionaries too. And I wish I was more of a visionary because I admire that so much in people. Someone that can listen to someone tell them, well, that's never been done, or that's not possible, or I don't know what you're talking about, and just continue on their path.
Well, it's interesting because I do think you're doing visionary work. Honestly.
I wasn't begging for that quote.
No, it wasn't. No, but I actually wanted to reframe your way of describing yourself in the sense that, I mean, you're doing, I've had the pleasure of knowing you, Linda, for 15 years, maybe, I would think.
At least.
And I say, well, you've done a lot of pivots. look at the medium that you're working in. Of course, it's like cutting edge, and you are willing to be a visionary for other women as well.
Well, that's the greatest compliment ever. Thank you,
And I mean
Angela.
it. I mean it in a very genuine way.
Angela, what's next for you? Are we going to see a fourth book? Look at you. You know it. Yeah, you know it.
Yes. And it's funny because after my third book, I really, and because I was trying to launch my nonprofit, and it's a lot of work. I mean, it's serious work to do that. I was so tired. And I said, I don't want to commit to any project. Visionary Women, the nonprofit, is really important to me, and I have to launch that. And I need to make sure that, it's of the best standards. And then slowly, I started gravitating towards reading, the biographies of incredible people again. And this idea came to my mind about partnerships. That I think the way to move forward this whole female empowerment agenda is that we need to bring men into the conversation. We're not
I agree.
working in a vacuum. And actually, one of the salons, we had male speakers and talking about that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, so I think a book that would fascinate me is looking at all the dynamics of male-female work relationships, whether they were couples or not couples, married, unmarried, and the dynamics of showing how two people can come together and create something much bigger than just one person alone.
How interesting. So this would be a more intellectual book as opposed to visual with like an Assouline book, or would it?
Well,
look at you. You're thinking
Assouline
outside.
Wants it.
You're
kidding.
Assouline
really wants
See?
it.
You're so outside the box. That's amazing. I couldn't even see that.
Yeah, no, Assouline wants it. And I, even all these books that I've written, except for Life as a Visitor, they're very text heavy. They are. But they're willing to take it because they see that I have a readership, and it sells, the book sells. So that's a good thing. So I'm still going with them. And they've been fabulous publishers for me because they give me a lot of leeway in the people I choose and how I want to approach it. And that to me gives me a certain kind of freedom to play with my ideas and formulate them and write them, which I think that's a gift. Yeah.
Angela, what should women who were mid-reinvention take away from your story? What are some things that they can think about and learn from?
Right. And I think while I was doing research on my last book, I interviewed Lima Bowie. She's the Nobel laureate from 2011, I believe, from Liberia. She won the Nobel Peace Prize. And the story was that this woman was a battered wife with 4 kids with a high school education and a refugee. Liberia was suffering from 13 years of civil war. And there was one moment she turned around and she said, I need to do something else. The story is a very long one, but her quote was the most poignant for me. And that was, in order to be someone else, you need to disregard who you were before. And it's not saying that you disown yourself or your identity, but it's to leave that, just put it on hold. If she were to be acting as if she was a disempowered, poor refugee that was a battered woman all her life, she wouldn't be able to do the things that she was. So her advice was, just suspend that belief for just a little while, mm-hmm. and approach something else and give yourself that space to be someone bigger. And it's really stayed with me.
It's kind of like I heard a therapist once say, okay, you keep, harping on that story. Create a new story.
Yeah.
It's like create a new story for yourself.
Absolutely. We need to give ourselves that kind of permission.
Angela, thank you so much for being here today. I've enjoyed our conversation.
A pleasure.
And thank you for joining us. If you're interested to see what SheSez guests are coming up, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and it'll tell you every Tuesday who's coming down the pike. Thanks again.